Greetings everyone, here's Lodric and this is the game War in the Pacific Admirals Edition. And this is the play by email match against KilRoy, the first match. This is now also the end of this first play by email match against KilRoy. He was a commander of the Allied Forces. We arrived at the 5th of June 1942 and like I said already in the turn before, that there was always some issues with the game. Sometimes it was smoothly running, then we had Kilroy. I mean, I had never issues, but Kilroy had often issues, more or less. That he had yeah, other animation not matching with the game. I think Jochen also had this. So far, I know this always happens sooner or later. Sometimes only once every 30 turns or every 40 turns. I don't know how often this really happens. The problem is, I always play Japan. And as a Japanese player, you never see this issue because the Japanese side is always a master. In the Allies, they only copy the file of the Japanese player and then showing only normal, maybe a little different the situation because of fog of war. I also don't really understand how the game can mess up this system because if there's one master and you make a copy of a master, then normally it would be for me very clear that it must be. I mean, I don't know why the game sometimes showing other results and uh, yeah, battle animations or whatever. The game is old, so yeah. In the end, Kiro, and because there was also this new version 27 beta with the new map, and KilRoy bought a new PC, and then he set up everything new, and then he asked if we simply can terminate this one or at least stop it and try something completely new. Then he had some fresh experience. He played this game many years, but maybe for some time not more. So he was maybe a little out of touch. And in the end, I agree with this and say, okay, it was also a little one-sided sometimes. I mean, the allies can always come back, not like the Japanese. They normally have only one way. Uh, and so I maybe show a little more background information about this campaign. Long time I don't use more any tracker software. It was simply to you must always load the turn, and with Kilroy I had 2 or 3 turns per day, and then sometimes I forgot it, and then once I also had a problem with my tracker software, then I had reinstall it, and then I cannot more see the past. Then I was more or less 2 or 3 months in the game, and then you also don't really need tracker software. I think at least for the Japanese side, if you have a feeling for the map and if you know how to check some the most important bases and where you have to watch to find out if something is working or not working. And maybe the most important is that you keep an eye on your ships and the upgrades if there's something to upgrade. But this is also not too complicated. Uh, for the allies, it's maybe more complicated. You have much more equipment. The map is bigger for you, so maybe it is for the allied player simply more important to use some additional software to keep everything running more smoothly. Uh, so this is now the final score. Again, KilRoy give up this game. If someone like to continue this, you can maybe, or I can ask KilRoy. Of course, I mean, the allies can always come back, and the game will not stop automatically in 43 if you have this victory ratio 4-1. There's always this, I think, the window will plop up, and then there's a question: you want to accept this victory or you want to continue the game? And but I also, I mean, I have a new game with KilRoy. In the new game, we already in end of January 1942, so we have also nearly 7 weeks now in game time already. I will start to record this new map match with a new map also soon, maybe tomorrow or today, I don't know. Still scenario 1, so there's not a big difference. But about the new game, I can talk about next time. So this is the score, and for some reason we have very interesting numbers here, like exactly 1,000 Allies airplanes getting destroyed air to air, and against 355. So the kill ratio is roughly air to air losses 1 to 3, and flag losses is more like 5 to 3, 155 to 29. So you can see that destroyed on field. That kill. So I mean, of course, this is the first half year of the war, and there's many buffaloes, Dutch buffaloes, British buffaloes, American buffaloes, and all this outdated equipment in the Russian, Chinese, American, in the Philippines. They all are not very great. Many also outdated Dutch bombers. So it is easily to get kills in the first 6 months of the war, and maybe the Japanese player also needs these kills to pressure the Allied air power. Because so far I know this will switch latest in summer, autumn, or spring of 43 completely. The Allies getting more pilots overall. They have more nations, so they're getting also more pilots, more air wings. They can train much more. They're getting, let's say, in 43, summer 43, I think the technology level is not more in favor for Japan if the Japanese player cannot use the A&D tool for his own advantages. So, yeah. And, air war was at the end in if you all add up all the numbers, you can roughly say that KilRoy lost 2,000 airplanes and I lost 1,000 airplanes. So a kill ratio of 2 to 1 is good, but also nothing too special. I don't think that in the air war you can create much better values. If both are playing, if one side only do stupid things, of course you can get better kills, but I think this is okay. If you have a kill ratio of 1 to 1, I think it's still acceptable at the early stage, and later on you are maybe happy with 1 to 1. The biggest points where I create the most points out of this is of course the land battles. This is heavily impacted by China, because the rest of the map is, I think, standard. I mean, what I conquer so far on the map is all nothing too crazy. Of course, we had here some Allied invasion attempts on Marcus Island, Saipan, and I destroy there some American equipment. In New Zealand, we battled each other. Yeah, I know this is maybe a little out of scope of the original real war, but I would say this is not too massive change. Most points coming here out of China. In ship sunk, we can later check what kind of ships. I lost some ships, but this is of course heavily fog of war. So I'm not so sure how many points I really get out of this 6,500. I only know that my roughly 800 points are truly lost. And at the end we was here at a points ratio, so 37,500 to 6,700. So, and it's still only June. Of course, there's 6 months coming, and these 6 months are now not more so in favor for Japan. But with the situation we have now, of course, it's maybe I'm not so sure. KilRoy maybe use all his free equipment already, so it can happen that the next 6 months is also not so easily for the allies, and that he must now wait for 43 to really get a shift of power, because he lost maybe so many ships and equipment that he have now not more the best time. If he maybe keep all his equipment in the second line and hold back and don't strike me, then he maybe was able already to build up enough forces to strike uh, much harder back. Yeah, but at the end, Kilo play very aggressive and active, and he try many things maybe, and see how I react against this. Yeah, and maybe it's played simply out in favor for me. So the air losses in total, we had 3,100 airplanes. Let's go for my Japanese side. So these are all true numbers. Most of my number one is zeros and dive bombers and the K torpedo bombers. This is always related to carrier operations, and the Nail and Betty bombers are the next. So very typical airplanes getting destroyed. And this is all Navy pilots. So you can see already that the amount of pilots the Japanese lose is heavily stick to the Navy. I think at least early on. And if I would roughly say, if you are the Japanese player, you must try to get the army air force much more active in the war, and to maybe take over some jobs of the navy, however you can do this. But you get more army pilots compared to navy pilots, and if you stock up 5,000 or 10,000 army pilots but you're running out of navy pilots, you will have issues later. What else I can say? This is at the end what I lost. Nothing really too special. The air war in China was nothing really special, similar to, I don't know really. I think in the Jochen game and also in the Dojo game, there was not really too much air war in China so far. It's always where you want to use your, as an allied player, where you want to use your flying tigers. You try to hold Burma as long as possible with your air force, or you try to mess up the Japanese campaign in China. China is always the problem, that how you want feed the air war. You need aviation support, you need supplies, and this is always lacking in China, at least early on. So I understand why many allies players maybe say, I give up China. I don't even try to fight in China air war in 42. Good. So this is all my losses. If there's only maybe someone sees this. This is Fog of War. So I cannot tell you if it's true. But we have here already, these are the Buffalo 1. This is a British Buffaloes. American P-40s. This is Dutch twin engine bombers. British twin engine bombers. American dive bombers. Flying Tigers. Russian bombers, twin engine bombers, and so on and so on. And also a bunch of Catalinas getting destroyed. They're always good to get rid. Many ops losses, similar to the Jochen game, but also I think Dojo I really don't remember more. This is too long ago. Yeah. And these are already smaller numbers, quantities. Much more airframes, but you can see that many of these airframes have always very small kill ratio. and the big bunch of killing stuff is really fighters, buffaloes and P40s, plus a lot of twin engine bombers. Uh, at the end, I had 336 killed pilots, 112 wounded, and 170 missing. So if you add this up, maybe up to 500 pilots I lost. Most of the wounded pilots will come back over time, but let's say 500 lost pilots in 6 months, more or less. I don't know how many pilots KilRoy lost. This I have really no information. Normally, it is if you defend, you losing much. The numbers of lost pilots is smaller. Let's say this. Uh, for me, attacking it's more or less like 2 airframes, 1 lost pilots roughly. If you attack, and I think if you defend, then it's more or less like 3 or 4 lost airframes for 1 lost pilot, maybe roughly like this. And this is my top pilots. So I have 1 pilot with 13 kills, experience 88, and he fly already 318 missions. And again, a mission is for a fighter pilot much easier because if he is on cap duty and there are 3 or 4 different cap at air attacks coming, then he flies 3 or 4 times. Then he get of course 3 missions per day. And this is from Suryo. This is the carrier was had the order to secure the landing at Malaya. So from the day one, he was always busy and always had a lot to do. And they are all Navy pilots. So you can see that they are all carrier pilots. Most of them. Not all, but most of them. There are some army pilots with 5 and 6 kills. But I think army pilots would come later. Not so early. And you can see. I also lost some of my pilots, of course. So when I don't have really so many aces, I have only a bunch of pilots always with 1 or 2 kills. This is 3 kills, 4 kills, 5 kills, 6, 7. And there's really only a handful of pilots that are elite. So maybe this first top 10 or top 1 dozen pilot up to 9 or 8, they fighting non-stop. I also follow, of course, the German tradition that a pilot will join the army, fight, and die. I mean, it's Japanese tradition. You don't must go back and train young pilots. This is nonsense. If a young pilot is too stupid and die, then he's only weak. And if he die for the emperor, then he still had at least honor. So I don't use Trapcom. You can use it, and I would maybe do it later on, but not in the first beginning of the war. But this is a personal decision, so I don't say it's better. And I would also maybe say in the long run, Tropcom is much better. You get pilots out of this in the future. But yeah, maybe now in summer I could maybe take out some pilots out of this. So this was about these pilots. And my pool is empty because there's always never enough pilots. I think here's nothing really interesting inside. Yeah, only here you can see that it's empty. No pilot, no one is here. Ship sunk. Okay. Here again, this is heavily fog of war. I can maybe show my losses in related to maybe points. And then you can see that the most value points ship I lost was this AMC. I'm not more sure they was killed different location, different time. Nothing Two ships sunk, I think, together, yeah. Ishijima, I think this was his interception. Yeah. Once KilRoy, roughly, this was end of April, there was a cruiser formation from the Allies, more or less skipped my early detection and was able to intercept one of my troop convoys and sunk a bunch of ships. This was, I think, one of the most successful operations against my navy. But at the end, he lost all of his ships. I think at least all of his 3 heavy cruisers getting killed. He was able to penetrate my detection and early warning. He killed my troop transport ships more or less. Then he tried to escape, and on the way out, he gets intercepted by my torpedo bombers and lost all his cruisers. Only the destroyers escaped. So he killed AMC, and he lost a heavy cruiser. It's maybe still a good ratio for the Allies. Still, it's a little. You cannot call it a fully success operations. Good, and the rest was only, yeah, a lot of cargo ships. So I lost here mostly cargo ships and 2 light cruisers. Some submarines, fleet submarines. Also 4 fleet destroyers and 1 more fleet destroyer, so 5 fleet destroyers. Maybe this is also 6 fleet destroyers, and maybe in total 6, 5, 5, 6, 5 submarines. These are only this mini submarines. I don't care them, and APD is, yeah, a second line destroyer, and these are all small cargo ships. So this is more or less everything, and a bunch of patrol ships, and also some minesweeper equipment. But this is all again only very small equipment and will not hurt in the long run. So nothing heavy. AMCs are maybe heavy, but yeah. The light cruisers are heavy to say, or hard to say. I really don't count them like, maybe you can call them like a fleet destroyer. These are only 4,000 tons. The firepower is like a destroyer. I mean, the only thing what they can do is fight enemy destroyers. They cannot fight anything bigger. So to lose them is not a big setback for the Japanese. Good. And the Allies lost, but again, this is fog of war. I don't think that the British carrier go down. I know the Lexington, I think, go down, or the Yorktown. One of them sunk. Because I get a confirmation that at the 1st of May a carrier sunk. But the Yorktown, I'm not so sure. Repulse, Prince of Wales, for sure. And then to these 2 American battleships, I'm also not so sure. Royal Sovereign is, I think, for sure dead. Really it's hard to say because the sinking date is too near the play date. So first after 3 months, you can really say it's true for sure. I only know Repulse and Prince of Wales because I was this I really saw, and I get already confirmation that Lexington sunk. This I also know for sure. Hermes is also for sure dead. This is long time ago already. And Boise. So this is a lot of carrier stuff plus a bunch of heavy battleships. Then a lot of cruisers. Maybe I can make the military equipment. This is military. Okay, this is also maybe military. Plus submarines. So this is all the military equipment. A lot of cruisers. I mean, a lot of light cruisers. I was never I never realized how many light cruisers the Allies had so early in the war. But these are all British, Dutch, New Zealand, so not so many American cruisers. And a lot of submarines plus a bunch of destroyers. These are the better American destroyers or British destroyers. So destroyers, and then the more shitty destroyers. I mean, British destroyers are maybe always fine, but then you have a lot of these Clemson class destroyers. Still, they're okay. If they're hunting a submarine or giving anti-aircraft cover later on, they're not bad. Good. Yeah. Ground units I have so far destroyed. I mean, I rebuilt everything. There was not so much I lost. Only the coastal batteries from Saipan I cannot rebuild because I don't took the island back so far. Uh, and industry output, I think I talked about this, but you can see here that my actual production of supplies is here now 16,000, 10,000, half, 3,500. I think this is okay. If you have roughly 30,000 supplies production per day, I think this is enough. You cannot really feed much more. Maybe 32,000, 33,000. Then you will come simply everywhere at the limit that there is simply not enough on the map to feed all this. I repair oil, I repair refineries, I repair heavy industry, but I will not repair light industry or manpower. Normally, there's only if I conquer something, then it's changed. And resources I normally also don't repair. Make normally no real sense for me. Armament, I never built here anything. From day one, I built here nothing, and so long you don't really lose a lot of equipment in China or somewhere else, I think then you have always enough in the pool. Vehicle, I always round up the numbers a little to get a little more production capacity, but I don't push it too much. But you need a little more. The game gives you too little, maybe like 20 more facilities, I think is first enough. But it's always heavily related to how many losses you have, and maybe later on you must increase these numbers. But I simply at the beginning of the game I would say don't build anything what you don't need immediately. And much more important is immediately to raise the production of engines. And this the first 3 or 4 months you must normally produce non-stop engine factories. Everything. 32, 33, 34, 35. You need them all. How high you want to go is heavily related to what you want to produce, how much you want to produce, and what A&D you have. But this is my setup. This is the classic 2-2-3-2. Of course, you can change this. In the new KilRoy game, I make it a little different. And the number one question is if you play scenario 1. This is all related to scenario 1 and not scenario 2. That is totally different. Is if you want to go for this H34, because you start with 0. You can start at the game and say, I don't want this 34, and I don't want Helen, and I don't want Tojo. If you don't want these 2 airframes, then you also don't need this engine. And this is normally the first question you must choose what you want. And I would also say if you want Tojo, then you also go for Helen. To skip only one of this off, 2 airframes make no sense. But again, player's choice. Yeah. So. And I also normally need only this factory with the 80 engines for the H60. Because this air engine is also very special and you don't need it too much. And there is no boost out of this. Make no sense to go for 500 engine. There is simply nothing coming. Who needs this? And my air production is, of course, still related to, yeah, I don't push here too much anything else. If I don't have high losses, then I also don't need high production numbers. Of course, in later 42 or latest in 43, you must maybe change these numbers because you have simply much more active air war all over the map. But at the beginning, or now in the first 6 months, I was able to survive this with 100 zeros and 100 Oscars, each 100. And because I don't really use so much army fighters, I even had to switch off the production of Oscars. Make no sense to produce higher numbers, because sooner or later the 1C will be outdated. Then they're only for training duty. Yeah, I was just able to produce higher numbers of Helen, so I could now start to reform all my army bombers. But game's over, no choice more or no chance. And also the Nick just arrived in greater numbers, one airplane per day. I was never able to really get them into battle. No. Maybe the Jake airplane, I think you start with 22 or 23 airplanes production per month. I would maybe never touch this. In the new game, I think I'll keep it like this. You really don't need to rush the Jack production airframe, I would say. It's a little waste of engines and supplies to push here even this more. But I add here a little more, but I think it's waste. Good. My A&D, you can see, I was able to, I rush here for the A6 M8, but no. This is now all history, so I get here not much out of this more. Todros was coming close, but I mean, I just started the A&D, so maybe, I don't know if I can catch July. Latest August, maybe. Good. Now in June, the supply situation is so, because I have now this roughly 30,000 supplies all over the map production, not all in Japan. But I produce here now enough supplies that I have a stock of over 200,000. This is maybe even already enough, but make no sense to ship now everything by force to China if China also don't ask for this, because China is also, there's no real need. I mean, there's always need where there's a battle. Then they always say, games say, not enough supplies, not enough supplies. But after 2 or 3 days, it automatically will shift the supplies where they are needed. So if I stock now 200,000 supplies in Shanghai or in Tokyo, it's not a big difference. I think the war in China is now in the final stage. KilRoy was not able to kick me out of Chongqing. I would normally now finish off all these smaller Chinese forces everywhere. This big Chinese forces also in the central is now, I think, out of supplies. I had to catch here this force. Yeah, but I dominate this guy, so I can always bomb him. He's never faster than me. After the fall of Rangoon is also the last really important base I must to catch. Now I have only to hold it. And again, how the Allies won't attack in Burma if they don't control the skies and the sea, it's hard. I was able to repair, I think, nearly everything. Refineries, oil. I think Soabaya, I don't really push too much because Soabaya was completely burnt. I only produce here little refineries and little. I think this is more or less the only base I not really repair so much so far. Or everything else I think is already done. Even Miri is, at least as the refineries are nearly done, and then I will start now with the oil. Uh, for the scenario one, it's important also to set up your shippings of the supplies. So I ship everything to Manila. So you have here this many bases. Every base produces little resources. Then I get them together in Manila, and then I will simply form a bigger task force simply because this is a big port. Here you can create task forces of 80,000 or 100,000 tons and then ship them together to Japan. I think it's simply better to have one big 100,000 ton supply or 50,000 ton cargo task force and not always 10,000, 12,000, so small stuff. Uh, but everyone is like free to play how you want. Australia, the invasion of Darwin was okay, but there's nothing happened. I think the Australian forces are all busy in New Zealand, so there's nothing really for KilRoy to kill me here. My subs also find up. Sometimes they can find something, but not always. I know that KilRoy have a base on Pago Pago, and I think also somewhere here because I always get this recon information. Could be also here. I'm not so sure, but. I had here my task forces, and I was waiting if something is coming to Fiji, but at the end nothing happened. This is a new skin, but it's the same airplane, so it's still A6M2. And if there's nothing to do, then I simply train my pilots, getting better, getting better, getting better. So they're ready for fighter. The air battle skill they have already. The experience is also okay. They still need some defense skill. But if no one is coming, then I can also not produce any kills. So this air wing have no kills. Pity. But also no losses, only some ops losses. Yeah, we will never see how this play out in New Zealand. But I'm confident because I have now normally enough supplies. At least to survive a little longer. And if I don't take Auckland, then in the worst case I can fall back to Gisborne and wait that my carriers finish the operation at Saipan. So I would normally say here 1 or 2 more weeks for the Central Pacific, and then I could maybe go South Pacific. Or I could also maybe say, okay, I bring my India task force here, or I split it and say, okay, I take 3, 4 carriers out and only keep here 2 or 3 carriers in the India Ocean. If I really want this, I could do this. Again, for the Allies to push here early on, it's give pressure on the Japanese player. And of course, if you at the beginning, I was also a little confused how seriously I must take this. First, we fight only for Marcus for Wake, but then it was Marcus Island, and then he already was in Pegan and take Sampan. But again, if you simply force your shipping then around and go to Palau Islands and then to Truk, Rabul, then there's not much that the Allies win out of this directly, only some bases they can use submarines and scout airplanes. Of course, you cannot let the Allies keep this for too long. But it is also, I would not act immediately and send everything what is possible in the first day after the Allies show up here. I would always try to scout this, get submarines in position, and it can also be a benefit at the end because I mean, if the Allies control these islands like KilRoy did, then he needs to ship supplies and equipment here. And this can be intercepted, and at the end, maybe this is more a burden for the Allies than a benefit. Tja. Maybe last About chips, I don't know if it's really important, but you can see that I push for all the carriers. What is possible. You must only make sure that you have some pool points, and then you must always change them maybe from normal production to increase. I really don't see any benefit to increase the production of this capacity to build more new navy shipyards or new merchant shipyards. I think this is based off points, but uh, I am still not able to get the Yamatos on the map with Dojo, with Jochen, with every game. I always try to link them up to December 42. Only 2 weeks ago I could maybe start the production again, but then of course I still need 5-6 months more to finish the production, but yeah, maybe another day. Again, Yamato battleships don't really look too much, or don't hope too much. They're battleships. They consume a lot of fuel, and yeah, they're battleships. The limitation is simply you must find the enemy, or you can use them for bombardment. But I think for bombardment also the old battleships are enough. So there's really no must to build them. If you more, I think it's more reasonable normally to stop both of these battleships and go full for carrier. Maybe it's even better to produce the light cruisers here and not the battleships. The light cruisers have at least anti-submarine equipment, and this is maybe more important for the Japanese. But I will not rush this kind of light cruisers. Destroyers, I always try to push what is possible. But like everyone knows, these are all high class destroyers. You can see here the cost 10 points, 12, 13. This is all first class destroyers. In what the Japanese normally need is here coming first in 44. This is this American class destroyers. So these are all, so why they only cost 6 points. But I think they are similar to Clemson class destroyers. They are also only 1,500 tons. They give enough. They are good for anti-submarine, anti-aircraft. I mean, at least what they can give. And their main purpose is not making surface engagement compared to this kind of ships. These ships are designed to make surface engagement. Good. Yeah. And like many players, I think also do, I was always thinking about this already at the Dojo game, and I was always thinking, and it's of course not realistic. A submarine is not more expensive or more complicated to build a destroyer. I mean, the Germans built 500, 600 submarines, and they have really not the capacity like the British. But in this game, submarines are really expensive compared to destroyers. So you could maybe simply say, don't produce any submarines. At least I do this also in the new KilRoy game. I hold all submarine production, more or less like 90%. And then I increase all carrier production. All carriers, all destroyers. This is and escort carriers, but these are the three types of class of ships I would always produce non-stop at maximum speed. And if I can or must switch something off, I would say switch off the battleships, switch off the submarines, and switch maybe off the light cruisers. But at least in scenario 1, if you switch off all submarines, and at least switch off also Shinano no one needs, and you maybe don't must push Taiyo because it's so expensive, then I think it's possible to produce the rest all on maximum speed. Good. Tja, this is a game. I will start the new match with KilRoy again. It's also scenario 1. The new match, I still use this map mode with the new map because this map mod is only a skin. The real map is different. The skin is not matching 100%, but it's only optical issue. The game still works because there was no so far a map mod looks acceptable. The original map looks so yeah, not so nice, I would say. But I can explain this in the new match. I can only maybe say that the new scenario 1, there's one big difference because I offer more or less KilRoy. Or I told him maybe he need a benefit, something to balance the power. So I say I can give him the Kwantong army, that I must pay them, or maybe Mark 14 torpedoes working. And then he choose working Mark 14 torpedoes. So the new match have the same rules like everything, only that the Mark 14s, Mark 15s, Mark 13s, they always working with 90% like every other torpedo. No malfunction. Good. So he don't must wait to autumn 43 to have the full functional torpedoes. I think summer or autumn 43, the game normally we say, okay, now you're at 90%. But yeah. Then I hope this answers some questions, of course never all. We will see how the new match will play out and if KilRoy is doing better or if I can improve a little and if it's still maybe interesting to watch. Then see you next time. Take care. Bye bye.